Last conflict for me then is, again, it's similar to Afghanistan, and this is a major conflict that has actually been in the news a lot. So the reason I've included it in this podcast, and it's Yemen, by the way, before I carry on going, the reason I've included it in this podcast is because in Yemen, again, much like Afghanistan, there's a lot of themes that seem to slip under the radar in the analysis, a lot of media coverage, analysis, whatever it may be. A lot of this focuses on immediate incidents. So, for example, Saudi airstrikes targeted Sana'a, or an IED going off, or even a drone strike targeting Saudi or the UAE more recently. And they often don't talk about perhaps the implications of this, or even the cause of it, I guess, or what these events mean for the broader conflict. So, the war in Yemen has been ongoing for quite some time now, and Saudi forces have also been heavily involved. But what we've seen recently, and quite dramatically as well, is drone attacks coming from Yemen targeting very built-up areas in the UAE, or in Dubai in particular, Dubai and Abu Dhabi in particular. And these are carried out by Saudi drones and ballistic missiles. I think the Saudis at the time claimed they're carried out by Samad 3 drones, which have a longer range than the rest of the drones in their arsenal. So they are capable of hitting areas very far away from Yemeni territory. And a crashed Houthi drone that was found in Oman suggests that perhaps the route they're taking to get to the UAE is, rather than going through Saudi and thus through layers of Saudi air defense, they may be going through Omani airspace and moving up through Saudi to try and get to the UAE from there. Either way, regardless of the route and regardless of what munitions are being used, the Houthis have shown quite clearly to the world that they are capable of targeting the UAE. And this in itself is quite a recent development. There have been similar attacks throughout previous years with the UAE, when Houthis have targeted places such as Riyadh with drones and missiles and caused quite significant disruption. But this decision to target the UAE after weeks of threatening the UAE, months of threatening the UAE, and months of threatening to target these sites, comes as a bit of an escalation. It comes as a bit of a dramatic change in the conflict, in that now the UAE, who have been looking to not disengage, but looking to reduce their involvement perhaps in the conflict, to suddenly find themselves in a position when they either back down in the face of Houthi aggression on their own soil, which would obviously make them look very weak and is almost unthinkable, or they become more involved in the conflict. And one of the reasons I believe that drove these drone strikes recently was a recent offensive carried out by southern forces in Yemen against Houthi positions in around Marib province, which has actually had some limited success on the ground in capturing territory. So I'll provide a bit of context to this. In Yemen, you've got the Houthis, you've got the Yemeni government, and then you've got southern forces, who are essentially a separatist force, I guess. And the southern forces are very heavily backed by the UAE. So in order to try and convince the UAE to stop backing this southern forces offensive, which was very successful at the time, Houthis decided to target the UAE at the source. They decided to send drones straight to the UAE. And whilst this has had a significant impact on the tourism industry, for example, and in the UAE, it's not really changed their decision. A more concentrated campaign against the UAE and Saudi, perhaps using Houthi drones and missiles, maybe could force a decision from the UAE. But I find it hard to imagine a major state such as the UAE backing down in the face of aggression. I imagine instead they'll probably improve their air defense systems, which they've already been doing, relying on probably US support in order to do so, and dig in, perhaps looking to try and support southern forces in Yemen, as well as the government forces, to try and bring about a further collapse of Houthi territory.
About those air defense systems, do cities like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, do they have sort of an Iron Dome system, or do these rockets actually land, or drone strikes?
So I'm not actually too sure about the specifics of the UAE air defense. I've spent most of my time looking at Saudi ones. So when the strikes came in the UAE, I was caught on the back foot a little bit. But generally speaking, they're not assigned per city, I think. They're more around borders and high-profile points. But yes, the UAE has got its own pretty sophisticated air defense systems. And a lot of these drones are intercepted rather than landing. But we can see in Saudi Arabia, using that as a case study, Saudi Arabia intercepts drones on a near weekly basis. They're very common, these attacks, often around places such in the southern provinces. But again, the Houthis know that this is going to happen. The Houthis have seemingly an endless supply of drones and missiles. So the Houthis know that if they launch enough, eventually one or two will get through. I think there's a bit of a narrative that these air defenses are completely impenetrable. It's just not the case. You can get drones and missiles through them. It's happened repeatedly in the Saudi border area, so there's no reason why it's not going to continue to happen in the UAE. So bear in mind, it only takes one. So imagine one drone hitting the Burj Khalifa is quite a significant event. It would have a huge impact. So I think that's what the UAE are wary of. Their air defense now is very good, but they are already working on trying to improve it, because again, it would just take one drone. If they could fire 50 and one gets through, it's just that one that will remember, not the 49 that were intercepted, for obvious reasons. So yes, it is a sophisticated air defense system across the entire country, but again, this attack showed that there's definitely weaknesses in it. Thanks for listening to that clip. If you want to hear the whole episode, then please head over to wherever you get your podcasts from.